I'm going to tell you something I haven't said out loud to anyone in a long time, because saying it changes what becomes real. They found our location, not by accident, not by coincidence. By tracing every small thing I thought I had already buried beneath layers of silence, distance, and time. And now there's a knock on the world I built around us. Tonight, we don't have the comfort of thinking about it. We don't have the luxury of tomorrow. We move tonight. I wish I could say this calmly, like a man explaining logistics, but my mind is not a system right now. It's a place collapsing quietly from the inside, because this isn't about moving houses. It's about everything we were trying to protect finally being seen, and you're the only person I keep thinking about while everything is breaking. I keep asking myself one question I can't escape. If I take you with me into uncertainty, am I protecting you? Or am I pulling you into something you never asked for? Because love was never supposed to feel like this. Love was supposed to be soft, predictable, safe, but what we have, it's neither soft nor safe. It's real in a way that makes everything else feel like fiction, and now reality is catching up to it. They didn't just find coordinates, they found patterns. Postars of where I go when I disappear from the world. Patterns of who I contact when I shouldn't. Patterns of a life I tried to keep separated from the consequences of my choices. And somehow, they found you in it. That's what scares me the most. Not that I'm exposed, but that you are. Tell me something honestly, if I'm still allowed to ask you anything in a moment like this. When everything becomes unstable, do you still choose the person, or do you choose your peace? Because I might be asking you to lose both. There's a bag already half-packed near the door. Not because I was prepared, but because a part of me always knew this moment could come. People like me don't build things without being followed by something eventually. But you were never supposed to be part of that consequence. And yet here you are, inside it with me. I can almost hear your silence right now, the way you don't immediately respond when something feels too heavy to touch. That silence, it always tells me more than words ever could, and I need you to understand something before anything else. If we leave tonight, we don't just leave a place. We leave certainty, we leave familiarity, we leave the illusion that life can be controlled if you just plan well enough. I used to believe control was everything, that if I could predict enough variables, nothing would ever surprise me again. But then I met you. And suddenly, unpredictability stopped feeling like failure. It started feeling like you. That's the part I never admitted properly. You changed how I understand risk, not in business, in love. And now love is the riskiest system I've ever entered. There's a car waiting downstairs that I didn't call myself. That's how fast this shifted. That's how little time I had to decide whether I was going to pretend nothing is happening, or accept that something already has. I chose acceptance because denial doesn't protect anyone. It just delays impact. But I need to ask you something I've been avoiding in every version of this conversation in my head. If tonight becomes the beginning of us living without a stable ground, will you still look at me the same way, when I'm no longer the version of myself you first trusted? Or will you quietly start mourning me while I'm still standing in front of you? That thought, it stays with me more than the fear of being found, because being found is external, but losing how you see me, that's internal collapse. I want to tell you I have everything under control, but I don't believe in lies strong enough to survive this moment. I don't know what happens after tonight. I only know that staying is no longer neutral. Staying is a decision someone else is already forcing us into, and I refuse that kind of ownership over us, so listen to me carefully, not as a plan, but as a confession. I would rather step into uncertainty with you than stay in safety without you, but even as I say that, I feel the weight of what I'm asking because love sounds beautiful when it's spoken in calm rooms. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it right now. Let's hit 10K subscribers quickly together, because once we do, there's a surprise waiting for you. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. It sounds very different when it's spoken while everything is being taken apart in real time. I don't want you to think this is heroism. It isn't. It's attachment. It's fear. It's something more fragile than courage. It's the inability to imagine tomorrow without you in it. And that should scare me more than it does. But it doesn't. It feels like truth. There are moments in life where everything slows down so much that you can hear your own decisions forming before you make them. This is one of those moments. And I keep thinking about the first time you trusted me with something personal. Not because it was important in the world's eyes, but because it was important to you. You didn't need to. You chose to. And I remember thinking at that moment, this is how people disappear into each other without noticing. Not through drama, through trust. And now that same trust is sitting inside a situation neither of us asked for. I don't know who is listening on the other side of this anymore. I don't know how much of our life has already been mapped by people who don't understand what it means to care for someone quietly. But I know one thing clearly. I will not let you become collateral in a story you never agreed to, even if it means I have to become someone you don't recognize for a while, even if it means you start questioning me, even if it means you hesitate, because I can survive being misunderstood. But I cannot survive the thought of you being left behind in a place that stops feeling safe. Tell me, when things become unstable, do you reach for stability? Or do you reach for the person who makes instability feel worth enduring? I need to know which version of you is standing in front of me right now, because I am not asking you to follow me blindly. I am asking you to choose with eyes open. And I hate that I have to ask at all. 2 minutes passed in silence after I first said this. And I know that silence is not emptiness. It's processing. It's fear trying to find language. If you're still here with me in this moment, I need you to stay a little closer to the thought of us than the fear around us. And if this is the first time you're hearing me like this, then maybe I should say something I've avoided saying too directly. I want you here, not as an idea, not as a possibility, not as something temporary until things settle. I want you here as part of the direction I'm choosing, even when direction itself has disappeared. And I need to know where you are watching this from, because somehow that detail matters to me more than it should right now. And if you're still listening, I want you to quietly consider something that most people never ask themselves honestly. When everything familiar starts disappearing, do you run toward what is safe or toward what is true? Because I think tonight forces that question in a way neither of us can avoid anymore. And I haven't told you the real reason yet, not fully, not in a way that explains why they were able to find us this fast. Not in a way that explains why leaving isn't optional anymore. And that truth, it changes everything between us in a way I'm not sure either of us is ready for. We don't have time left in the way we used to measure time. So I need to stop pretending this is just about movement. This is about choosing what kind of life we are willing to survive inside. And I need to know, are you still with me when the version of me you trusted begins to disappear into something unfamiliar? Because once we step out of this place tonight, there is no returning to who we were before this conversation began. We are already past the point where pretending helps anything. I can feel it in the way the night has changed its shape around us. Not outside. Inside. Inside the decisions I am no longer making alone. Inside the space between what I know and what I am afraid to say out loud. You're still here with me. I can feel that too, even if you haven't spoken. Even if your silence is doing that thing it always does. Holding more meaning than words ever manage. I need you to understand what I am about to say is not part of a plan anymore. It's not strategy. It's survival mixed with something far more dangerous. Emotion. Because emotion is what makes people predictable. And right now, being predictable is the one thing we cannot afford. The car is still downstairs. Engine off, like it's waiting for permission that neither of us feels ready to give. And I keep thinking, it's strange how something as ordinary as a car can feel like a border between two versions of a life. One where we stay known, and one where we become untraceable in every way except emotionally. Because that part, I don't think I could erase even if I tried. You are not something I can delete from memory, even if everything else has to be rewritten. Do you know what that does to a person like me? Someone who built their entire understanding of life on systems, predictability, logic? It breaks the system. You become the exception that cannot be modeled. And I used to believe exceptions were weaknesses in a structure. Now I think they might be the only reasons structures are worth building at all. But that realization comes too late for comfort, because comfort is already gone. And I need to bring you into something heavier now. Something I've been avoiding saying, because once it's spoken, it changes how you hear everything else. They didn't just trace us. They anticipated us. That means this was never about where we are. It was about what we were going to become. And that thought, I can't sit with it easily, because it suggests something I don't want to fully accept, that our story was not private as I believed it was. That somewhere along the way, we became part of something larger than intimacy. And I hate that idea because love should not be analyzed from the outside. Love should not be predicted. But ours was, and I only realized it when it was already too late to correct it quietly. There are moments when truth doesn't arrive like a revelation. It arrives like pressure, slow, unstoppable, until it forces you to either bend or break. I haven't told you this part yet, because I needed to be sure I wasn't misunderstanding the pattern, but I was. I wasn't seeing surveillance in the obvious way people imagine it. I was seeing it in something far more subtle, behavioral mapping. Emotional tracking, not machines watching us like in stories, but people interpreting us through fragments we left behind without meaning to, masks that were too consistent, timing that was too precise, senses that followed predictable emotional cycles. And the worst part? It wasn't even hard for them, because when two people care about each other deeply enough, they create rhythm, and rhythm can be tracked. I didn't want to believe that at first, because it made something beautiful feel dangerous. But now I cannot unsee it, and I hate that I am the reason you are even hearing this version of reality. I should have protected you from the structure of it, not pulled you into the mechanics. But here we are, and I need you to stay with me while I say something that might feel unfair. If I start making decisions that feel colder than usual tonight, don't assume I stopped caring. Assume I started seeing more clearly than I ever wanted to, because clarity and warmth do not always coexist. Sometimes one destroys the other, and I am trying to choose which version of me survives this night without losing you in the process. Do you understand how impossible that balance is? To be protective without becoming distant, to be honest without becoming frightening, to be present without becoming exposed. There is a version of me that would hold your hand through this and say everything will be fine, but I would be lying, and I made a promise to myself a long time ago that I would not build relationships on softened truths, even if softened truths feel kinder in the moment. So I am not going to do that to you. Not now, not when it matters most. Instead, I need you to sit with something uncomfortable. If we leave tonight, we are not escaping danger. We are relocating inside it. Because whatever found us did not stop at location, it followed pattern, and patterns repeat, unless broken, and breaking patterns is not gentle. It requires distance, silence, reconstruction of identity. I can hear your question even if you haven't asked it yet. Why didn't I tell you sooner? The answer is not simple, because part of me hoped I was wrong, and another part of me was afraid that if I spoke it too early, it would become real before we were ready to carry it. That's the hidden truth I've been avoiding saying directly, not because I don't trust you, but because I wasn't ready to accept what it meant for us. If we are being tracked in patterns, then every version of normal becomes a vulnerability. And that includes love as we have been living it, but I need you to hear something even more important than that. You are not the problem in this, you never were. If anything, you are the variable that made the system visible to me, and that is both the most beautiful and most dangerous thing about you, because people like me don't usually see the system until something emotionally real disrupts it. You were that disruption, and now disruption has consequences. I can feel the weight of that realization sitting between us right now, like the air has become more honest than comfortable. Tell me something I cannot measure. When you think of safety, do you think of staying away from danger, or do you think of staying close to the person who makes danger feel survivable? Because those are not the same answer. Your answer will decide how this night unfolds. I keep walking through the room without moving. That strange mental pacing people do when they are trying to hold themselves together without collapsing in front of someone they care about. And I find myself looking at the small details, the things that would not matter in any other night, the light on the wall, the way time feels uneven, the silence between us that is no longer empty but full of decisions not yet made, full of fear not yet named, full of love that is no longer abstract. And I am realizing something I don't say easily. This is the first time I have felt love as a responsibility instead of a feeling, and I don't know if that is growth or danger. Maybe both. Maybe they are the same thing when stakes become high enough. I want to reach for certainty, but certainty is the first thing that disappears when systems collapse. And I think we are inside a collapse we didn't initiate, but are now responsible for surviving. I need you to imagine something with me, even if it hurts a little. If we stay here, nothing changes immediately. That is the illusion. But the pattern continues, and what continues eventually becomes unavoidable. If we leave, everything changes immediately. That is the pain. But it interrupts the pattern. And interruption is the only form of control we still have left. Do you see the difference? One is slow loss, the other is sharp risk, and I am standing between them, trying to protect you from both, while knowing I cannot. Because protection itself has limits when you are not the only one being watched. There is something else I haven't fully said yet, and it sits underneath everything I've been explaining. If they found us through patterns, then they are not just following us. They are waiting for us to repeat ourselves, which means the worst thing we could do right now is behave like ourselves. And that is where I feel the fracture inside me forming, because if I cannot be myself, what version of me do you trust? And if I change too much, do you still recognize the person you chose? These are not theoretical questions anymore. They are active variables in a situation that does not pause for emotional processing. I wish I could slow time for you. Just enough to let you feel the weight of this without being crushed by it. But time is moving forward, without permission. And I am still here trying to decide how much of me you need to see to stay safe, and how much of me you need to see to stay close. Because both matter, and both conflict, and I am running out of ways to satisfy both at the same time. There is a moment coming, I can feel it, a point where hesitation itself becomes a decision. And I am afraid of what you will think of me in that moment, because I might not look like the version of me you trusted at the beginning. I might look like someone you don't fully understand. But I need you to remember something if that happens. Understanding and love do not always arrive together. Sometimes love arrives first, and understanding takes longer, much longer. The car is still waiting, and now I am no longer sure if it is waiting for movement, or waiting for me to become someone capable of making the choice without looking back. And I am about to say something I have avoided saying, because it feels like stepping over a line that cannot be uncrossed. If we get into that car, we are not just leaving a place. We are accepting that our life from this point forward will be defined by what we run toward, and what follows us anyway. And I need to know if you are still willing to exist in a story where love is not separate from consequence, because I am already in it. And I am not sure I can leave it without losing something essential in myself. The lights outside feel closer now, not physically, psychologically, like attention is compressing toward us, and I find myself lowering my voice, even though no one has told me to. That instinct alone tells me more than I want to know. Something is close enough that my body believes silence matters. And I hate that feeling, because it confirms everything I have been trying to slow down. This is no longer theoretical, this is now directional, and direction is about to replace hesitation. I am looking at you in a way I cannot fully translate into words, because I am trying to decide how much truth you can hold without breaking into fear, and how much fear you need to hold in order to stay aware. And I don't know which version of love this is anymore, protection, exposure, or surrender, but I do know this. We cannot stay in this moment forever, something is already moving closer. And I haven't told you the most important part yet, not because I am hiding it, but because once I say it, there is no version of tonight that can remain unchanged. And I am not sure either of us is ready for that final shift, the kind that removes all remaining illusions about why this started, and what it has already cost. And I am still here, still choosing words carefully enough to keep you close, even as everything around us is asking for speed. And I need you to stay with me just a little longer before I cross that point, where there is no returning to the version of this conversation that still feels safe. Because after that, there is only action, and consequences that no longer care about how much we feel for each other. I didn't move at first. Not because I didn't understand what was happening, but because there are moments when understanding arrives too fast for the body to agree with it. And this was one of those moments, the kind where silence stops being peace and becomes warning. You were still there with me. I could feel it, not in a physical way, in a deeper way, the kind of presence that becomes more real when everything else starts to disappear. And that's when I realized something I had been avoiding across every version of this night. It was never just about being found. It was about what being found forces you to admit, about what collapses when you stop being able to hide inside normal life. And I was running out of places inside myself that still felt normal. I looked at the door again, not because I was ready, but because waiting had started to feel more dangerous than moving. There is a strange shift that happens when fear crosses a certain threshold. At first, it freezes you, then it sharpens you. And then, if it keeps growing, it begins to clarify you. That's what was happening now. Everything unnecessary was starting to fall away, and what remained was painfully simple, me, and the fact that staying was no longer neutral, it was exposure. I finally spoke, but my voice was quieter than I expected, not weak, controlled, but stripped of everything that usually makes speech feel safe. They are closer than I told you. The words didn't feel like information. They felt like a line crossing itself. Like once spoken, they changed the structure of the room. I could almost hear your thoughts before you said anything. That pause you always take when something becomes too real to answer quickly. I had learned that pause. It meant you were deciding whether the truth was survivable, and I hated that I had put you there. Because love should never require someone to calculate emotional survival in real time. But this did, and that is the part I couldn't soften anymore. I stepped closer to the window without fully looking outside. Because looking too directly at consequences has a way of making them feel permanent. Instead, I listened, not with ears, with instinct. And that instinct was no longer calm. It was alert in a way that didn't need confirmation. Something had shifted outside, not loudly. Not visibly, but in the way pressure changes before a storm breaks. I turned back to you slowly. And for the first time tonight, I stopped thinking like someone trying to protect a situation. And started thinking like someone trying to protect a person. That difference matters, because situations can be optimized, people cannot. I need you to listen to me without trying to fix anything in your mind yet, I said, and I hated that I had to say it like that, because it meant I was about to say something that would resist comfort. I didn't tell you everything earlier because I thought I had more time to understand it myself. A pause, a deeper breath than I wanted you to see. But I don't. That was the first fracture. Not outside, inside me, because admitting incomplete understanding is something I rarely allow myself. It creates instability in a world I built on structure. But you were more important than structure now. And that realization changed how I was standing in the room. Not like someone in control, like someone accountable, I continued. They didn't just trace where we were. My voice tightened slightly. They built a model of how we move when we are emotional. The sentence landed differently than I expected, because it removed this from coincidence and turned it into design. You don't realize how much of yourself becomes readable when you care about someone consistently, I said. And I didn't either, until it was too late to be invisible again. I saw the shift in your expression before you even spoke, that moment when love starts to feel slightly dangerous, not because of betrayal, because of exposure. And I felt something I wasn't prepared for. Guilt, not abstract, immediate. Because I was the one who brought you into a system that now included you without permission. I should have kept you farther from me, I said quietly, and I meant it. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't fully true. Because distance was never the real solution. Ignorance was not protection, and I couldn't lie to you anymore about that. That's when it happened, not outside, inside the room, a sound, subtle, not a knock, not force, something more precise, a confirmation of presence, and in that moment, everything inside me narrowed into one decision. We didn't have time left in the abstract sense anymore. We had time in the immediate sense. I moved towards you instinctively, not dramatic, not rushed, controlled urgency. The kind that only appears when someone stops debating and starts deciding. We're leaving now, I said, and there was no softness in it, not because I didn't care, but because care had become action, and action had become survival. But then something happened I didn't expect. I saw hesitation in you, not fear, not refusal, something more human, something deeper. You weren't just reacting to danger, you were reacting to me changing. And that is when the second fracture began, because I realized in that instant, you weren't only deciding whether to leave, you were deciding whether the version of me standing in front of you was still someone you recognized enough to follow. That realization hit harder than the external threat, because external threats can be escaped, tenal doubt cannot. I know what this looks like, I said, softer now. I know I sound different. A pause. And I know that sometimes when people change under pressure, the people they love start wondering if the original person is still there. I stepped closer, but not enough to overwhelm. I am still here, but even as I said it, I knew language was no longer enough to guarantee belief. Because belief had started shifting toward instinct, and instinct was now being pulled in two directions. Stay or leave. And both felt equally logical from different angles. That's the most dangerous kind of emotional moment, when both choices make sense. Because then love stops being certainty, it becomes interpretation. And interpretations can break. Another sound outside, closer this time. Not loud, precise again, intentional, and I felt the shift inside me complete. This was no longer about deciding. It was about acting before interpretation collapsed into panic. I took your hand, not asking anymore, not negotiating, but I didn't pull you. I anchored you, because there is a difference, and I needed you to feel it. I am not asking you to trust everything, I said. I am asking you to trust enough for movement. And then I added something I didn't plan to say, something that came from a place deeper than strategy. If you decide later that I was wrong, I will accept that. A pause. But not moving right now is not a neutral choice anymore. And that was the truth I had been circling all along. Neutrality had ended earlier than either of us admitted. We moved toward the door, and I could feel the weight of everything unsaid between us, not resolved, just suspended, like reality holding its breath. But right before we reached the exit, I stopped, because there was something I had not fully admitted yet.